Welcome to Ready, Set, Hunt. Whether you're an aspiring, new, or seasoned hunter, join us as we share our experiences and learn from other hunters around the country. You're doing well in your Final Four bracket. Or, sorry, not Final Four, March Madness bracket.
Yes. I am.
You have any money on the line or no?
I wish. If I did, I would certainly be in the running for some winnings.
Nice.
You don't do that stuff?
I'm just not super into college basketball. Really, the only college sport that I follow is college hockey, like any good Minnesotan. Yeah, I don't really follow college football either. I'm more of a baseball guy. And today was opening day, and my Twins really let me down. It was actually a pretty good game, but
They usually do.
Well, hey, today's episode, Chris, I don't know if you noticed the hat that I'm wearing. I had to represent Weatherby because I'm a little bit of a Weatherby fanboy, and today we're talking about rifles and ballistics. The title of the episode is Whiz Bang.
Whiz.
Bang. Or like a suppressor.
You got to get the thud.
That's true. The delayed thud. Yeah, we're talking about rifles, ballistics. Chris, do you have the outline pulled up for our discussion here today?
Outlines, preparedness? What? No, not me.
It's mainly so we don't go down too many rabbit holes. We do that even with the outline, but got to try and keep it in control somewhat.
I must have accidentally started drafting an email here. found it back behind a couple windows. Let's
all right.
see. We'll kick it off as I'm.
Yeah. Let me kick it off here.
Guy.
We've our journey with rifles has been. I would say we're still fairly early in the journey with rifles. We've talked on here about how we're from Minnesota, and in the region of Minnesota that we live in, it's a shotgun zone for deer hunting. So you're not allowed to use center fire rifles for deer hunting in the southern half of Minnesota, and so really our first exposure to rifles is when we decided we wanted to get into western hunting. And so I think on the last episode we talked a little bit about kind of that journey and that progression. Since we were talking about gear, we were talking about our tools that we use in the field. So but let's just kind of do a little overview of our experiences with rifles, and maybe what our first experiences with shooting rifles was. Chris, do you want to start it off?
Well, we talked about this a little bit last time, but when you go from a slug gun, like a 870 with a slug, and you're accustomed to 100 yards being fairly out there because you shot open sights for most of your life, it felt, even with putting glass or a scope on top of my 20 gauge shotgun, after I went to that setup, still like 100 yards seemed pretty far, because the brain just had something so ingrained in it. Like, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I've seen success. But like I said, missing at 70 on the buck of, one of those bucks of a lifetime. You're only going to get it, to be honest, unless you're blessed with funds, and some people are, and that's amazing. That's awesome. I'm just going to celebrate that. That's great. You're probably not going to get too many opportunities on something that's, something you could put on a wall and every single guy that walks through goes, dang.
Yeah,
I mean, nice deer.
Something that anyone would be happy to shoot. That buck definitely was.
Yeah, and like I said, I got a respectable one on my wall, and it's no slouch. It's got a great story, and I think that's why you mount Any game that that decision comes from a story,
Hmm.
and it's personal. But at the end of the day, going from just a slug gun to a rifle, when we got out at the target the first time, and I don't remember what we've. I think we said we were going to sight in at 200.
Yep.
And when I first laid down, I just remember going, "Oh, that's really far." And I had at
Yeah.
that time a lower magnification scope on my rifle, which was a Tikka, and I could tell right away. Like there are things you're going to notice about your gear. There are things you're going to notice about hunts. Whatever you're experiencing as a hunter. Your initial impressions are usually probably right. You're going to get a feeling about something. You're going to go like, I don't know if I like these boots. That's probably going to stick. Or you know,
Hmm.
this is kind of jacket's a little restricting in like my shoulders or something. That's going to stick most likely. So when I put my eye behind the scope and that distance was now doubled what I was used to, I could tell that my eye felt restricted, it like a little closed down because just it wasn't a large enough uh was it aperture, I guess, or
Objective lens.
yeah, just the diameter of that to where
Hmm.
you have your couple inches and there's a good spot with your eye resting back there. Your
Oh, you felt like.
my eye clearance and the objective size of the glass just felt particular, right? It needed to always kind of be more in a you had to kind of get it right and perfect,
Hmm.
which didn't let me really relax behind my rifle. So, long story short, I actually switched and got a nicer, larger scope on there with a little bit more magnification. And the magnification wasn't really the issue at the beginning, but once we started shooting 300, 400, 500, and I was really trying to stretch what I could do, I felt more comfortable if I could get closer to what I was looking at versus trying to like discern the target at
Hmm.
range. And that's going to be different on animals, but when you're really trying to sight in, you're looking for comfortability, you don't want to flinch, and you want to just be able to send it down range consistently.
Yep.
So that was like kind of my overall impression. That was like 2 years probably condensed into those that 2 minute little spiel, but it was really exciting
Yep.
just to
For
say
sure.
it, to sum that up, like to be able to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could shoot that far. And that's like a novice, like ready, set, hunt is about bringing new people in, and you're going to have experiences that you didn't expect, or you're going to be amazed by certain things, or like, wow, that's really useful and helpful, or um, so. What about you?
Well, having had almost no experience with rifles aside from like a 22 long rifle, a little plinker that you may have grown up shooting or whatever, I didn't really have any rifle experience. Closest thing I had was my slug gun. But for those who are listening who've neither shot a rifle or like a shotgun with slugs, even though our shotguns are set up specifically for taking longer range shots than like your average shotgun because they have rifling in the barrels, and they have ballistic tips on the projectiles and the slug guns. A shotgun shell is just not very efficient as far as like the powder burn and pressures and all that stuff. Everything that happens inside that barrel, it's just not nearly as efficient as a center fire rifle
you
cartridge.
you could probably describe it like having two different sized rocks on a beach, and you're going to see who can throw the farthest,
Mm-hmm.
and your body you can throw the smaller rock. It's got to have some weight, but you can throw that rock much further than a softball or bigger size rock in your hand. That's the same concept with like a shotgun to a rifle. That shotgun is just set up differently, and that projectile drops much quicker, kind of like the heavier rock,
Yep.
versus a smaller rock is more like that rifle. And you
Right.
and I can shoot 200 comfortably with our shotguns,
Mm-hmm.
but and I'd say we could probably stretch to 250. Once we hit 300, that's probably where
but
that
it's not
threshold falls off. But
but it's not as much of a gimme as it is with a rifle, right?
no,
Because
yeah, not at all. I'm just giving backdrop to anyone who's
mm-hmm.
listening that maybe doesn't have that experience, like you
To
said.
like put some numbers on it, for example. So a bullet's velocity is measured in feet per second. So I believe that my rifle, and I shoot 280 Ackley, so it's a 7 millimeter diameter bullet, right? My 280 Ackley shoots at just about 3,000 feet per second. That's moving pretty quick. That's fast.
Yeah,
In
our rifles are almost
comparison,
almost identical. Like the
mm-hmm,
7 Rem Mag and the 280 Ackley are essentially the
the
same round.
they're
Mine's just packed
very
a little bit
similar.
hotter.
Yep, and the design of the actual case is a little different,
Yep.
but in comparison, when my 20 gauge is shooting right around 1900 to 1950 feet per second. That's over 1,000. That's almost 1100 feet per second slower than my centerfire cartridge. And not only that, but the bullet that it shoots, the slug, is it's a 40. I think it's a 40 caliber bullet. So it's also almost not quite double the size, but the weight of it is 260 grains, whereas the bullet I shoot out of my rifle is between 150 and 155. So it's heavier and it shoots slower. And when you have something that's heavy and slow, it drops a lot faster. When I say drop, I mean like when a bullet leaves a barrel, gravity is moving against that bullet from the moment that it comes out the end of that barrel, right? Because gravity is a constant force. This is just physics here.
Yep.
So that bullet is going to start dropping almost immediately. When it first comes out, it actually has a slightly upward trajectory for just a tiny bit. But then once it hits its apex, it starts falling quickly. And that's what we're talking about when we say drop. And because the bullet out of a shotgun is moving slower and it's heavier, it drops a lot faster because it's just
Yeah.
not nearly as efficient and aerodynamic. So we're coming from a space with shotguns before when we were moving into rifle, being used to, you know, at 100 yard or at 200 yards, our slug would be dropping like almost 4 feet.
Hmm.
Whereas opposed to our rifles at 200 yards, our round has only dropped, maybe a few inches. So it's night and day difference. It's a completely different experience. And not only that, but our shotguns, their recoil level is significantly higher than our
Yeah.
rifles as well. So all that goes into saying it was a crazy experience going from shotguns to rifles. Um, and it was
It,
very enjoyable.
it kind of feels like when we made that transition, shotguns to rifles, we were just starting to really stretch our shotgun distances. It was probably like what, a 2-year window. It wasn't long
I feel
before
like
we
we
start
started
looking at Western hunting.
I feel like we
And
started getting more comfortable with taking slightly longer shots with our shotguns after we had shot with our rifles, mainly because when we I feel like when we jumped into rifles, we did a lot more research and a lot more learning about ballistics and how everything works. You know what I mean? Because I feel like with
yeah,
shotguns, it's like we
when I
kind of like we approached it from like, well, we used a BDC reticle, so it's just like these circles there's certain circles in our scope reticle, and those circles are denoted by a yardage number. So you're not really doing a whole lot of calculation. It's just like that's the yardage, and that's what
you
you
have your
have.
rangefinder, you're putting it on the
Yeah.
deer, you're going, okay, it's 137. We have little charts, right? We've put in the
Mm-hmm.
the ballistics into the velocity, energy, stuff like that, the drop into a little chart that we actually have kind of laminated on. Well, at least I do on my scope. I think you do too. But we crank that to whatever 137 comes out to, and then I just put it on like the second bead down or whatnot. But yeah, I went out and bought that Savage 220,
Yep.
the changing of my shotgun setup, simply because my uncle was like, "Oh, this is what you got to get,"
Yep.
and there was truly zero research. I was like, "Okay."
Mm-hmm.
Went out, grabbed it because I knew it was a rifled barrel. They had told me it shoots pretty much like a rifle. You'll be able to shoot more accurately. They were really hammering home. Like, I remember growing up as a kid and you would listen to the neighbor's hillside, and I kid you not, there would be 19 like shots going off almost simultaneously at like one deer, and you would be is there anything left of that animal?
Well, if they even hit it.
Yeah, and that's
You
the
know?
thing, like, too, if that deer was, like, coming across at 175 and you got truly, they sat in lawn chairs, and they sat on a knoll overlooking a big area, and they would just let shells fly, which is not ethical, it's not, uh, good sportsmanship, it's super trashy, and I don't think anyone respects it. I
Yeah.
imagine if you don't have anyone mentoring you to actually teach you more finesse in any type of trade, it can be kind of like childish fun.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you're doing something kind of stupid as a kid, and that's kind of what I think it boils down to. I was in an atmosphere with my uncles and my hunting crew, and they hammered home. Don't be shooting the little ones. Don't be like if you don't know where you're gonna hit, don't fire. Like don't be shooting through sticks and trees and all that stuff. They wanted the one shot. The animal goes like 30 yards, 40 yards with a good blood trail, if not drops on the spot, and you recover that animal well.
Hmm.
Like you want the meat. So there was a lot of guilting probably there. It wasn't putting down, but you could feel it in the atmosphere. Like there's an expectation of you, a part of this family, to be a good steward and excellent. And that's kind of where that like the cloth I'm torn from. But so yeah, going to our like you said, rifles. When we started researching, tell me about tell me about the first couple thoughts you had when because you're the one that pushed we should go out west. I'd always watch stuff on Real Tree or we'd pop in the VCR like the,
Yeah.
the videotape and I remember we would just get
Hmm.
hyped up at deer camp. But there'd be western hunts in there too. So just walk me through kind of maybe our relationship from a hunting standpoint. What started you onto the western side, and then what were those initial thoughts of specific to your rifle or looking for a rifle or learning about that whole space?
I think, honestly, I'm just someone who has a hard time sitting and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so after my first, I don't know, probably it would have been 2, 3, 4 years of hunting just locally here in Minnesota, whether it be, deer hunting, duck hunting, upland, really any of those. I got so interested in just the other kinds of hunting out there. And I'd always known that, there's elk hunting out west and mule deer and antelope and all these things. But to me, it almost felt unattainable just
Mm-hmm.
because I was just this guy from Minnesota and I had never been out there, out west really.
It's
Um,
intimidating.
it really is because it's just the unknown. But I'm also the kind of person that I love trying new things,
Mm-hmm.
and so
As am
um,
I.
yeah. And so when when I get interested in something, I kind of just like full send, right? I just fully dive into it, research, just absorbing as much information and content as I can. And so, honestly, I mean, I hate to say it. I shouldn't hate to say it. No shame here, but Meat Eater was a big thing for me, to kind of expose me to Western hunting and those species. And granted, Meat Eater's great about kind of hunting all over the country and showing all sorts of hunting, but seeing as I already knew a lot about whitetail hunting, turkey hunting, and all those, the Western hunting really did pique my interest, and I just kind of have this wanderlust and this desire for adventure that I feel like is kind of innate in every man in
Mm-hmm.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was just like, yeah, I think that's something I want to do. And if there's a will, there's a way. And so I just started researching. I read a lot of forums, started watching and absorbing as much like YouTube content as I could. Started reading reviews on rifles, on different calibers, all this stuff. Because by this point, I was already into archery, and so I'd already bought a bow, and I was kind of getting into that thing. Honestly, I mean, my journey into
Did we
hunting,
did we buy
it
our
happened
bows
I think around
before
the
our
same
rifles?
around. Yeah, we did for sure.
Wow, because I just remember that kind of being like a blur. It all kind of happened at once.
It happened very well. Everything happened really quickly. I mean, like
That's why the investment, the dollars for like gear and everything too was
up
like when we
front
did
was a
full
lot.
we did full send. That's true. That's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
We were committed and we were just this is going to be a part of our lives going forward. So,
Yep.
which
So
is wild because we hadn't done it yet.
right. So to be honest, my love for Weatherby, really, I didn't. Again, I didn't really know anything about rifles. I could tell you like the big brands, like
Where did Weatherby
Remington,
come from for you?
Meat Eater. They
Does Steve use Weatherby?
he has in the past. I think their current big sponsor is Sig Sauer, so they've been switching to Sig lately for like some of their rifles, like the Sig Cross and stuff. Um, but for a long time, Weatherby was like one of the main sponsors of their show and podcast and everything. So that's kind of how I got exposed to Weatherby. I mean, I knew about like Winchester and Remington and Browning and the
Mm-hmm.
classic big names in hunting when it comes to rifles and just firearms in general. But I thought Weatherby was cool because they're a U.S. based company, which a lot of them are, but a lot of them have their operations that are done overseas. But then Weatherby moved from California to Wyoming, and so I just thought that was really cool. And they had a good line of rifles that kind of met every budget type. And their entry level rifle, the Vanguard, is renowned for being a very good entry level rifle at not a terrible price. And so in my mind, I mean, I'd read about Tika and everything, and Tika's amazing, and I would happily buy a Tika, no problem there.
Because they're
Um,
Sako too, right?
Tika is made by Sako, which is a Finnish
Sako.
Sako, which is a Finnish company. The Finns make excellent rifles too, it turns out. Um, but yeah, I really something with me clicked with Weatherby. Again, it might have been the Meat Eater influence when I was young, but I've had no issue with their products. I've really liked them, and so that's kind of how I got into that rifle. And then I just started researching and being like, okay, what there's a bunch of different types of Vanguards, and I'm like, well, what do I want in a Vanguard? Or in a rifle, what are some of the features that matter to me? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a barrel that had contouring on it, um, or that was fluted. I wanted a fluted barrel,
Was yours
and
spiraled or no? I don't
my
remember.
current rifle is spiraled.
Wasn't
Yep,
it your first one? Wasn't
my first one had straight flutes.
okay, like mine.
Yes. Um, and fluting, for those of you who don't know, it's just like, so imagine a barrel is a cylinder, right? The thickness of the wall on the barrel, um, it can make a barrel really heavy, and so when they do fluting on a barrel, they remove a certain amount of metal from the barrel. It'll still maintain its structural integrity and its strength, but it removes some of the material and it takes some of the weight off the barrel. Some, not all rifles have fluting, and it's not necessarily a bad thing if they don't. It's just kind of a personal preference. Um, some would say it's more cosmetic than anything. The weight savings are probably pretty minimal, but um, so I wanted that, and then I wanted a gun that had a Cerakote finish on it. And Cerakote is just just kind of like it's kind of like a powder coat, but it's a ceramic coating that protects the metal parts of your rifle from corrosion and rust, which is a real thing. Um,
You're going to
but
interact with some weather out there.
yeah, but
Snow, rain. Yeah.
yeah, so before so I don't go too deep down this hole, that was kind of what I the journey I went on finding my rifle. And then had to go through the whole caliber selection thing too, which we can get to. I think we'll get to in just a little bit. But Chris, why don't you tell me a little bit about your decision on Tika? And also, we should mention these are bolt action rifles for true newbies who know nothing about rifles. There are different kinds of rifles. We're talking about bolt action rifles.
Yeah, the bolt action is going to be you're going to have something that a bolt that lays against this, left or right side of your firearm, and it's going to come up and then it's going to slide back. Your shell's going to go in, and then you're going to slide that forward to get into the chamber, and you're going to lock it in by bringing it back down. You're going to get your lever action rifle. I mean, this might be super self-explanatory, but if you've never even been around firearms or hunting, this is new stuff. Lever action is going to be underneath, typically some sort of lever right next to the trigger that kind of rolls down, opens the action up, which is it slides open. Same system or facilitation as that bolt action. It's just the lever on the bottom
Just a different
is
medium.
what's
Yeah.
doing that. And then you're gonna get you'll get your semi-autos, or your typical, people say AR platforms, stuff like that. But for what we're talking about, I didn't.
We're focusing really on bolt action here for
Yeah,
hunting purposes for the most part.
one
Some
shot,
people hunt
send
with
it.
lever. Sorry, some people hunt with lever actions. There are actually pump action rifles too.
Oh yeah, I
That
forgot about that.
that was a pretty common. It's not really a common thing anymore as much, but that was a really common thing probably the past 3 decades, mainly in the Midwest. Like a pump action Remington rifle. The model number's escaping me at the moment, but that's a pretty like legendary whitetail gun, tree stand gun, Wisconsin, Minnesota gun hunting type rifle. But
When
anyway,
I yeah when I knew about Winchester, Remington, Browning, because I'm coming from pretty much shotgun space, which obviously these companies do both and a lot of different types of firearm setups, platforms, but I didn't have a huge spectrum of knowledge. So, and my dad had one of my great uncle's rifles that they had passed down. It was a 270 Winchester 270,
yeah, that
right?
one's that rifle is a Savage.
Yeah, it is a
The
Savage.
brand, yeah, it's a oh, why is the model I had work done on it for him.
I know.
Why am I blanking on the model number? It's
It's
a
not super important, but long story short, I don't know how or why. I did a lot of Googling. So I started going in and I'm like, what's the best? I started with caliber, to be honest. What's the best rifle or load for Western hunting in America? And you get your top 5, your top 10. People give you your little like couple paragraph spiels. They give you some charts, and I I don't I landed on the 7 Rem Mag, 7 millimeter Remington Magnum, because I asked myself the one question, or a question: if I can only buy one rifle for my life, my whole life, what's it going to be? And I wanted to do everything.
mhm.
That's how I landed on the 7 Rem Mag. I can't remember. It might be superficial why I landed on Tika. Probably because, for one, it was a price point thing, and they're a little bit more reasonable than a lot of these other ones that are out there. I did get a premium version, so I got the Veil Wyland, and it's fantastic. I love it. It's basic from a stock standpoint, but the action is butter. It is
Mhm.
so smooth, and the barrels are tried and true, reviewed with the best of them. People love them. Lots of good things. I don't think I saw anybody hating on Atika, and I don't
No,
from
definitely not.
like they had their little like comments about the stock, right? Because it is more
Sure.
generic and you can't customize it as much. I At that time I just didn't. I'm not in the world of customizing, right? I'm not in the world of building rifle. I don't know what that even would mean. Fast forward to now, I'm like all about it. I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do. This to action. There's a couple actions I really love, Defiance, or the carbon barrel, or all that stuff. You
Yep.
start to be able to realize you can actually piece together stuff, kind of like people they call them motorheads or gearheads for their hot rods. It's totally like that for the
Mhm.
hunting community, and it's fun. It's scary fun because it can cost you your kidney. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll just all that to say is, when I went to Shields, I was able to pick up a Tika, And I would encourage you to go do that as well. Get out and like familiarize yourself and
Mm-hmm.
see what kind of options are out there, especially from a Western hunting standpoint. You're looking at weight, you're looking at kind of the size of the rifle, and you're looking at capacity is not as important in your bolt action platform, but there are obviously different setups where you can have, I don't know why you'd need like 6, 7 or more than that cartridges in your ready to go. But I'm not, to each their own, right? Each their own.
Yeah. There's a lot of personal preference that can happen when it comes to choosing a rifle and a caliber. Um, there's so many things that go into that, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. But Chris, why don't we do just a quick little overview of some of what we would say are some of the most popular calibers or cartridges on the market today, and maybe what some trends are that are happening when it comes to caliber select or cartridge
You
selection.
you want to go back and forth like popcorn?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, you start.
Let's
Throw one
just
out.
let's just let's just name one. 6.5 Creedmoor,
Ooh, 308,
30-06,
65 PRC,
7 PRC.
300 WSM. Ooh, I got a soft spot for that one.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Um, I feel like this has become really popular just in the past few months with a little bit of a trend that's been happening. But 6 millimeter Creedmoor.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna get those macho guys tend to live in this world, but they're gonna be like 300 Win Mag.
Oh yeah, classic. Okay, I'm trying to think a different caliber. 270 Winchester.
Yeah. I mean, you can go 7 PRC. It's pretty much a hot rodded.
I already said that one.
Did you?
Yep, I did.
Okay, 300 or
Yeah,
they got the 300 PRC, right?
yeah, yeah. It's like a cannon. Back down on the smaller end of the spectrum, 243.
What's funny is I've looked at so many different cartridges because there's like a zillion of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point where I guess I've kind of let most of them blend together
Yeah, there's
because
a
I
lot of
I know the
cartridges.
couple from a size standpoint. Like in our minds, our conversations are now, since we have like a go-to rifle for pretty much everything. Do you want to dress it up or dress it down from a weight, like a power, velocity, energy standpoint, size of the bullet standpoint? And I think we've shifted from like going a little bit larger, like a 300 WSM, actually in the opposite direction because
Something
of
smaller.
a podcast we listened to specifically addressing recoil.
Recoil and some terminal ballistics stuff too. I don't want to get too many haters on this topic, um, but I'm starting to be a bigger believer in lower recoil and high velocity, and really focusing on the choice of bullet that I use as opposed to that kinetic energy is king.
Yeah,
Um,
because you can shoot a larger round, and that, depending at the distance and what's going on with that bullet in the air, if it's wobbling, or I mean, you could have. There is something truly to be said about understanding what you're doing with the tool and what you're loading it with. That thing can come apart once it hits the animal, and it can superficially wound them.
yep.
Versus you have something that is small and precise. Uh, you have to think about this, everyone. It's a
Yeah.
bullet. Like this is a projectile that is, it hits you. Any of these hit you or me, and I mean, in the lung area, we're dead.
Hmm.
So it's the same concept for an animal too. Like, do you really need to send a cannonball downrange? No, you don't.
Right. Yeah. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but not all bullets are created equal. There are different bullet designs for different intended purposes, and we'll talk about that in the next section. Um, but let's talk a little bit about how to choose the right rifle, and specifically, we'll talk about cartridge here. What are some factors, Chris, that you think are important to consider when you're selecting a cartridge to hunt with? Whether that's, whether this is your first rifle and you're like, I need something to do X because I'm going to be doing this, or yeah, talk to me a little bit about how you, now knowing what you know.
Well, there is something to be said about using too small of a bullet, and that's some of the critique of that conversation we were just having. Like you
Hmm.
can't go out. I mean, in theory, a 22 could kill
Anything.
an elephant if it hits it in the right spot. But you and I are not Legolas from Lord of the Rings or American Sniper, shooting a mile and being able to hit a melon sitting on a fence post. Like, that isn't us, everyone. Let's just be honest about
And
that.
that's not probably anyone listening to this podcast in
Yeah,
most reality,
yeah. So the first thing I just think about is, okay, what's your application? What are we going out for? What are you
Hmm.
what are you trying to accomplish? Which is, if it's rabbits, you don't need to use a 300 Win Mag. If,
Hmm.
if it's elk, you probably you probably should understand that a 22 is not the right thing to bring to that party. So you have to understand that spot. And then two, I would simply probably say comfortability with the recoil. And that's what the larger community, I think, is the conversation that's going on in the larger community today
Hmm.
more and more, because you just want to be successful. And why would you put more strain on your body? Why would you carry more weight in the field? Why would you why would you try to create a situation that's going to make it more difficult, when in actuality people go out and hunt with their bows, and that's, you know what is it, 70, 90 pounds of energy at the max going through that animal with that broadhead.
That's that. I would say that most actual kinetic energy on the animal is going to be probably 60 foot-pounds or less.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's
yeah.
going through the animal, and you don't need 2000. It's proven, because people archery hunt everything and they
Hmm.
kill everything with their bow.
Yeah. It's a slightly different the way that
Wound wound
the way that
channel.
an arrow kills is a little different apparatus than a rifle, but really, in theory, does it need to be that much different? Because an arrow is cutting, it's cutting
Mhm.
tissue, it's cutting through internal vital organs, right? And so with a rifle, in theory, you should be able to do roughly the same thing, if not better than an arrow. But again, we'll get to terminal ballistics here in a little bit. So you touched on, um, you know, knowing your application. So maybe like what animal you're hunting. Maybe would you say that distances you're planning, or that you foresee yourself shooting, would play a role in what caliber you select or what cartridge you
Yeah, there.
select?
Okay, in theory, if you're a great shooter and you can ring the plate, at 300, 400, and 500, like consistently, and you understand how you're dialing, you understand what the bullet's doing, you are like a truly like a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 shooter on that stuff. Dialing should allow you to go out really far, and that's all I'll say about that. Um,
When you say dialing, what do you mean by that?
well, you're going to range, and then you're going to figure out what yardage or meters, whatever your setup is, and you're going to go, okay, this is what my scope has to be set to in order for
Mm-hmm.
me to put it on the target and pull the trigger and have it perform this and do the same thing as it would at 200 yards at 800 yards.
Yep.
So,
And you're dialing using the elevation turret on the top of your scope to accomplish that, correct?
yeah. So that's a comfortability thing, and that is a knowledge and wisdom space, right?
Mm-hmm. And
Typically, if you're
experience.
if you're getting out in the field and you don't have that in your pocket, you don't have those feathers in your hat, you haven't it's not tried and true in what you do every day from a hunting standpoint, I would highly recommend you don't just go dink around launching rounds, at 800, 1,000 yards.
Mm-hmm.
trying to be really cool, or there's that idea, oh, I shot this giant muley at 1,000 yards, great story,
Yeah.
but no one cares at the end of the no
Long
one cares
range
at the end of the day.
long range hunting has definitely been a trend the past few years in the hunting space. And while it's super fun to shoot long distance and hit things at long distance, shooting at an animal at long distance is a very different story. And like, I'll speak
they're
for
they're
us,
moving, right? They're
right?
pivoting. They're, if you shoot, they hear something, they could drop a
Mm-hmm.
foot with like darting away.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many factors there. It's not just, it's a matrix of factors. So
Yeah.
that's why you're looking at recoil application. If you can just make sure you double lung something, you're good. If you double lung any animal, they're gonna die or expire pretty quick.
Yep. Um, Now, what if someone's not hunting out west? What if they're maybe they don't foresee themselves ever taking a shot past even 150 yards because they're hunting in thicker timber. Maybe they're from the Northeast or the Midwest here. Um, do
That's
they
fantastic for
should
them.
should they go out and get the same kind of rifle or the same caliber that someone who's hunting elk out in the plains of Wyoming or the mountains of Wyoming is going to be getting?
They absolutely can, but at the end of the day, a 308 round is going to be more than sufficient under 300 yards all day long. It's going to have a lot of energy. It's going to do its thing. It's, if you can be accurate. And that's the same thing. All rifles are not created equal. All barrels do not send the projectile perfectly straight down the range. Some like to go left, some like to go right. Different cartridges that, depending on their load, you can get flyers within that factory load. And when I say factory load, I mean a box of ammo. You pull out all those shells. They're going to ballpark on the energy, velocity, the stats of that round, specific round to that rifle. But your rifle is also going to shoot it differently, depending on the
Right.
barrel length, depending on even the you can have the same caliber and different rounds from different manufacturers. One's going to come out hotter than the other. And guess what? At 200 and 300 yards, you're going to start to have variations in drop. So you can't just shoot the same ammo out of your rifle, or sorry, you can't shoot different ammos out of your rifle
Expect them to hit the
expecting,
same spot.
yeah, at distance. So if you do have um your hunting area with less distance involved, that's actually really great, because you're going to have, in theory, way more accurate kills on animals, shots on animals. You're not going to really have to worry about what kind of ammo you're using. You're not going to have to
To an
worry about
extent, yeah.
wind, for the most part. And most of the land and hunting area east, Midwest, are not large areas you're shooting across. Like,
Hmm.
property wise, they're just not that big.
Right.
So
Everything's parceled out quite a bit smaller. So,
yeah, what thoughts do you have there to add?
I would say that on top of, your type of game, potential distances you're shooting, terrain, I think all of those things are very important to take into consideration when selecting a cartridge. But I also want to jump to, I think there's other things to consider as well. Let's talk about how scarce an ammo or a certain cartridge might be. If you're someone your plan is to buy factory ammo, um, and you're not going to be doing any hand loading or reloading of your own, it might not be the best idea to buy a some cartridge or chambering that's real exotic. It's where it's going to be hard to find ammo on the shelves. Um, we're definitely not in the same situation that we were, 2-3 years ago, where ammo was really scarce and pretty much only the most common types of ammo were available on shelves.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely certain cartridges that, in general, are just going to be a lot harder to find. So I shoot 280 Ackley improved. It's not. I can pretty much find. I can find factory ammo for it pretty much any store I go to, but I don't have a giant selection, mainly because it's becoming more popular, but it's not like the most popular. It doesn't like rank up there with like 30-06 or 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor or anything. When I go to a store, I usually have like 3, maybe 4 options of ammo. So if I'm looking for a particular type of factory ammo, a lot of the time I have to buy it online because there'll be a larger selection there. But if you're a guy who just wants to be able to roll up to Shields or Fleet Farm or Cabela's, walk in and buy a box of ammo for your rifle, or want to have a good selection of types of ammo for your rifle, that should be a consideration for you. Um, Also, the harder to find ammo tends to be more expensive, just because supply and demand, just basic economics. So that's a consideration. So if you're like, I want to be able to find my factory ammo anywhere I go, I want to have 10 options to choose from, and I just don't even want to have to think about it. 308, 30-06, 7 Rem Mag to an extent, 6.5 Creedmoor. You can find those anywhere, and there are a ton of options. So that's something I would consider. And also, you want to choose a caliber or cartridge that it's going to be easy to find factory made rifles that chamber that. So, say you want to buy like a Savage 110 or something, or a Weatherby Vanguard or a Tikka. Um, there are certain cartridges that it's going to be hard to find um, in a factory rifle, because you have to have the rifle, and if it doesn't shoot the cartridge, if they don't chamber it in the cartridge you want, then you're going to have to buy some other rifle. And usually the rifles that use the more exotic cartridges, those are going to be more expensive as well. Um, they're almost kind of more like boutique cartridges, I would call them. Um, those cartridges that are harder to find, some of them can be super fun, and some of them have like really awesome performance. But if you're just getting into hunting, you're buying your first rifle, getting something like that might not be a great option. You want something you're gonna be able to find, and something that's going to be cheap enough that you can actually practice with. um, so that's kind of where my mind goes. And then also, one last thing that I think of is, um, when selecting an actual rifle, now moving away from the cartridge talk and kind of moving to rifles, again, you have to think about your application. Are you just going to be hunting in the Midwest and doing tree stand hunting, or, whitetail hunting? You probably don't need like an ultralight mountain rifle, because the lighter the rifle, the more expensive it is typically. You don't need a super light rifle. You can buy a factory rifle that weighs 8 or 9 pounds, and it's not going to be a problem because you're not lugging it all over the place. But if you're going to be doing, backcountry excursions, 5 to 7 day backpack hunts, so you're going to be hiking in the mountains and going long distances, a lighter rifle would be nice. But there are also caveats to that. The lighter the rifle, typically the harder it recoils. It's not as easy to shoot as a heavy rifle. So really, application of what you're going to be doing, the type of hunting you're going to be doing, is not only going to determine what type of cartridge you choose, but also it's going to determine the kind of a rifle you actually buy. Um, so that's kind of where my mind goes there. Chris, you want to do a fun little rapid fire here? In terms of talking application, you want to do a little rapid fire of choice of cartridge for different game species?
Okay.
All right, we'll do popcorn again. You go first. You
So,
you say the animal. You say the animal. I'll say what my choice of caliber or cartridge would be, and then you say your choice.
okay, and this is not bullet weight. It's
Just straight up
just
chambering.
okay. Pronghorn.
25-06.
Ooh. 6 Creed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Midwest whitetail.
I was gonna say 7 Rem Mag for everything that you asked me, because that's what I shoot.
We'll get that to the end. We'll just say best all around.
But
Spoiler alert.
right after that, I thought about 308 because it's so tried and true
Yeah.
for Midwest, and yeah.
Nice. And the nice thing, I'm going to say 6.5 Creedmoor for Midwest whitetail. The nice thing about the 308, it is so versatile, because you can get anything from like 110 grain bullets all the way up to like 220 grain bullets. There are so many different variations that you can use that in. So 308 really is a great kind of do it all round.
Yep.
obviously knowing your application and your shot distance is important when selecting that kind of stuff. But anyway, okay, so I said Midwest whitetail. Okay, your turn.
Goat.
Ooh, 6.5 PRC. Actually, there's a different 6.5 that I like better, and it's more exotic. So I'm going to say it 6.5 Weatherby RPM.
Boo. 7 rem mag. I mean, just because
you
I
could
can,
you could say that for anything.
I know that's what I was gonna do. I mean, that's
how
why I
about
bought my
how about
rifle, because you can
how
shoot
about we
those.
make the rule? How we make the rule no repeats?
Oh, that's tough.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to take 7 rem meg back?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna go with. Did you say 6.5 Creedmoor yet?
I did, but
And
you
you
can
said,
use it.
and I
You can
said
say it
6
because you
Creed.
haven't.
I said 6 Creed.
Yeah, I said 6.5 PRC, but then I took it back and said 6.5 Weatherby RPM. So if you want to use a 6.5 PRC, it's still open
Yeah,
for the
I'll use the
taking.
6.5 PRC.
Okay, cool. Um, okay. Did I? You said mountain goat, mule deer.
280 Ackley.
That's a really good choice. That's a really good choice. Okay, so now that I can't use that, and you use 6.5 PRC, and I already use 6.5 Weatherby RPM, this is tough. I mean, there's a million. I'm 270 WSM.
Ooh, nice.
Ooh, actually, no, I changed my mind. 6.8 Western.
I'm sorry
Also,
for
also a
those of you
two.
listening that have no idea and we're just throwing around numbers.
Hey, you know what?
Uh,
You can hear these names and you can go research them yourself, and you can start,
there is a lot
start
of
breaking things
charts.
down.
Like there's a ton of great charts out there that list all of these. You'll see bullet size, the casing, all of it right on the bottom, plane of that chart, and it'll show you some good understanding of velocity and energy. And
Yeah, and we're going to talk about ballistics and stuff here next, so we can kind of talk about what some of those terms are and how to kind of read those and figure out what's important. But okay,
is my animal next?
yeah, because I just said mule deer, and I on the record chose 6.8 Western.
Okay. Coyote.
Ooh, and you already said 6 arc.
5.56.
Okay, good choice.
Your animal.
Um, elk.
300 WSM.
Darn it. Well, now that means I'm going to steal your 7 rem mag.
I mean, truly, if what's hard is I want to dress up my current cartridge and dress it down, and 300 WSM is my dress up,
It's your dress
and
up.
6 Creed, I think is.
Is your dress down.
But the more I talk about it, like the 6, I don't think I'd do 6.5 Creed more. I either do the 6 Creed or the 6.5 PRC, but the 6.5 PRC is almost too close to the 7 Rem Meg. Like if I'm shooting
I know.
139 SSTs, like is there a difference? Not. I don't
Not
have the charts in
significant.
front of me, but when I shoot lighter rounds in mine, I haven't shot anything but the terminals, the 155s, in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really grade the amount of recoil I'm experiencing. Mine does kick, but it's not like terrible. It's like a rifle. It's just a rifle going off. It's not a shotgun.
Yeah.
So if I'm dressing it down, to me it has to be a noticeably different like round setup. And then I got to figure just how much I want that rifle to weigh, because you don't want to make it so light that it's kicking like the same as the other one, right? Because that
I
is a
don't think that's
scenario.
possible if you were to go with a truly small caliber,
I don't know. I bet you.
like a
I bet you
243 or
you could
something.
get a rifle down to like 5 pounds. Some custom setup,
Weatherby
not with
Backcountry
glass,
2.0.
not with glass, but
No, I know. The Weatherby Backcountry 2.0, that one weighs 5.6 pounds bare. That's super light. Anyway,
bison.
did I answer for? Yeah, I just said a 7 rem for
Okay.
bison. I'm just not a huge, like, really big caliber guy. So most people would probably be like, 338 Lapua
Yeah.
or Lapua or something like that. But I just don't really see a reason for myself to go over a 30 caliber. So I'll just say 300 Win Mag.
Hmm. I think I'd go. Nobody said 7 PRC yet, right?
No.
Yeah, I think that's what I'd go with.
Okay. Um, let's see. We've done elk. We've done mountain goat. We've done pronghorn. We've done mule deer. A black bear.
Is this all Western?
A lot of,
Is
I
is
mean,
the
but
category
there's
is
not
the
a lot
category
of, there's,
Western? Like, can I say red stag?
I mean,
Or are we keeping it North?
sure. I'm keeping it North American for
Okay.
the most part because no beginner hunter is getting into red stag unless they live in New Zealand.
You said black bear.
Yeah, black bear. And let me give some context because there could be some major differences here. I'm going to say Western black bear.
So they're a little bit bigger.
Not necessarily, but just the context is so different.
Okay.
Because if you're back east, you're probably baiting, and your shot is going to be no farther than 50 yards. So let's say Western black bear, spot and stock.
Yeah, we've used up a lot of good rounds, so I'm trying to think.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, shooting across a canyon is going to be involve some distance.
Definitely a possibility.
I don't know. I think you might have me stumped.
There's one that I already said, but then took it back. That would be a good option.
Well, like I shared previously, there are cartridges that live in my head all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's everything else
Right.
that I just don't pay attention to.
Yep.
Primarily because the ones that live in my head, I've weighed all the other ones statistically and in a review sense against the ones that are in my head,
Well, yeah. The hard
and they
thing is
just
we've
fall
already.
off, right?
The hard thing is that the chamberings that I would probably choose we've already used, but
Yep.
there are still some good options on the table. Oh, and I don't. Oh yeah, I didn't answer yet, so I still have I have a couple ideas, but
Like, are you trying to stump? I don't have anything in my
no, I'm
head.
not trying to stump you. Do
Yeah,
you
I don't
want me
have
just to
anything.
go?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, for this one, because I'm gonna save the other one I'm thinking for probably just for the best, a good all around. Um, but for this one, I'd say 270 WSM, or you could use a 270 Winchester too. That's still an excellent round. But I'll say 270 WSM.
Yeah, I don't got anything. My mind is completely blank, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm thinking.
Okay, for the best all around, or for good all around, all you can use any caliber that we've already talked about. Anything's fair game.
I'd probably use my 7.
7 rem mag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'll just go with mine as well. I'll say 280 Ackley because their performance is like nearly identical.
It's too good and it's too applicable to everything I hunt or I want to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hard part of I don't ever need to build or get another rifle,
You really
right?
don't,
You
right?
don't. And that's a fantastic problem to have because it
Mm-hmm.
keeps money in your pocket and your wife happy.
So you've already talked about what you want to build next for your next rifle, and we've talked about either dressing up or dressing down, kind of because I mean, with both of our primary rifles, we're kind of living in the middle, or kind of like the perfect, kind of like just right, the three bears, just right. And I think my next rifle, I'm going to dress down a little bit, and I'm going to be
It's so interesting from the standpoint like the 280 AI, the Ackley is already dressed down from mine, and it
mhm.
might be.
But they're shooting the same projectiles, like the exact same bullet.
Yeah, I'm I try to figure out if that's the more ideal like all around caliber, or if it is the 7. But there's almost like not enough difference between the two to have an opinion on either one.
I would say the biggest difference between the two, and I mean, we're splitting hairs here, is probably the recoil. The 280 recoils slightly less
How light of projectiles do they go? Like 119 or 107, or
for the 280.
is that
Well, I
really
mean, if we're
light?
hand loading, it can shoot anything the 7 rem mag shoots because they are both using 7 millimeter projectiles.
Yeah, but the lowest I think I see on the shelves are 139s, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked out there for again, 280 Ackley improved. There aren't nearly as many factory loads as 7 rem mag. That could be a detractor. So I don't know what the lightest is. I think one of the lightest I've seen is 140 grains.
Yeah, and everyone, when we're talking about the lightest for these, we are really talking about a mid-range or like a middle of the road cartridge already.
Mm-hmm.
That performs high, like on the high end.
Yep.
So you don't need to get a fatter bullet in there that shoots a little bit slower, that carries in theory more energy, or in actuality more energy, because again, when you're putting something on the target, it's doing literally the exact same thing, and you're looking now more at the bullet inside the cartridge of like what it's doing on the animal. So
Hmm.
expansion, is it, are you trying to get more penetration, are you trying to do more, initial trauma right on the like in the wound channel. So again, this is gearheads. This is like guys having like a Z28 and an SS Camaro, and they're like, oh, this, I'm gonna redo this part of the engine because it's a, I'm not even gonna get, it's a different gear setup, right? We're talking about the
Hmm.
transmission, and Peter's like, well, I like this transmission because it shifts at, 4,800 RPMs, and in second,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
we're
And I'm
getting
like, well,
super
I
deep
like it
into
at 5100 RPMs. There's
right.
like no difference. They both do fast and they both do burnouts, and they're cool,
Hmm.
but it becomes your own. It's very personal. It's
Yeah,
cool being out in the field with your bros and or the ladies, and you're just like, you're bringing something unique to the table, all going after the same thing, and it's just fun. It's just fun.
it is fun. Okay, well, we've talked rifles, we've talked cartridges. Let's talk about just like the basics of ballistics here. Just so that our audience knows when we're talking about all these different terms, we're talking about terminal performance, we're talking about external performance, we're talking about, velocity, energy, all of these things. We need to talk I think we need to define some of these things so that people know exactly what we're talking
Yeah.
about, why
So
they're
let's
important.
let's start out real simple. I know
Mhm.
you're going to lead somewhere, but in my mind's just like there's really two simple things to think about. One, how fast the punch is coming at you, and
Mhm.
two, how big the hand, and how like heavy the punch when it impacts your chest. So you have velocity, which is how fast the bullet's going,
Yep.
and then you have how heavy the oomph is when that bullet makes contact with the target, and that's the energy.
Yep.
So those are the two main things. Your recoil is going to be because of those two things. The amount of drift in the wind is going to pertain to those two things. The amount of drop is going to pertain to those two things. So those are
Mhm.
literally the only two attributes that correlate to one another. And then you get like the, and that comes from like how much powder you need or how much powder you can pack in that cartridge to push that bullet out of that casing or out of that barrel. um do you have, is there anything else? I'll let you go back to it now, but I think that's the simplest way to think about what bullet is going in your
Yeah, so
rifle.
so pretty much everything you just described there is what would be defined as external ballistics. So we're talking
Yep.
about, yep, velocity, usually measured in feet per second. That's how fast that bullet's moving. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And different calibers or different cartridges are going to have different speeds based off the design of the cartridge, and then how heavy the projectile is that's being shot out.
We're
Again,
not
we
talking about what it's doing after it impacts. We're only talking about what it's doing in the air until it impacts.
correct. That would be external ballistics. So,
Yep.
kind of like the analogy Chris made earlier, you're not going to be able to throw something as fast that's really heavy as something is light. So, if you have a lighter projectile, typically that projectile is going to move faster. All right. It's going to have a higher velocity. And if you have a heavier projectile, that is going to have a lower velocity. Um, However, something that's important to understand is that just because you have a lighter bullet that's moving at a higher velocity when it first leaves the rifle or first leaves the barrel, does not mean that that projectile is going to inherently be faster downrange as the heavier bullet. The reason for that is physics here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that heavier bullet is going to maintain speed typically at a more efficient rate because it's going to be pushing through the wind and gravity because it has higher energy. Whereas a smaller bullet it's not going to be able to fight that gravity and that wind as efficiently just because it's a lighter weight. Um, so imagine like imagine like two boulders and you roll it down a hill. The heavier boulder is going to be slower at the get go, but as it continues moving, and granted, we're talking about momentum here, so this is a little bit different. The analogy is not perfect here, I'll admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, that larger boulder will overtake the smaller boulder. So I guess kind of think of it that way.
Well,
So yeah, that's
it's also like who's throwing it, right? So if if we're
yeah.
playing in that analogy, like I'm I'm not as strength wise, I'm not as strong as you, but I also have like my golf swing. I can probably smack a golf ball. Now, granted, if we're swinging the same, right? Back to physics, I have a longer swing, so or I can my arm length is also my wind up is much more lengthy. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're playing with physics, you're talking about efficiency too. Um, but if you get like a professional baseball player whose muscles are all toned up, that's the same thing with like how much powder and like what the barrel's doing, right? It's the ramp
Mm-hmm.
that's launching it. It's the amount of energy that's igniting behind it. And then also you get the efficiency that comes in with how the bullet's formed, and then also the bullet moving through the barrel, that rifled barrel, getting the spin on it, because once it comes out of there and it's exploding out, it's now dealing with the attributes of wind, precipitation, temperature, and then your gravity. And I won't get into Coriolis effect or
Yeah, all the really
different stuff like that that's
mm-hmm.
out there, but
If you want to learn more about this stuff, go research it. Go research the physics of a bullet in flight, and I think it'll do a lot to kind of
Ron
teach you.
Spomer,
Ron Spomer is a great
love that
resource.
guy.
Uncle Ron.
Wish I
Okay,
knew him.
let's talk a little bit about kinetic energy and exactly what that means. Chris, do you want to touch on what energy really is?
Well, uh it's the transfer of velocity and weight and to the animal, right? In the simplest of, is that how you would simply explain it in the context of
It doesn't
hunting with the
necessarily have to
rifle?
be it doesn't necessarily have to be on the animal, but your kinetic energy or the foot pounds of energy or force is going to diminish just like velocity the further the projectile gets from its origin or from the barrel, right?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about it as like wherever the target is at distance,
Mm-hmm.
that is changing
Yeah,
based on.
there's a constant kinetic energy, but that transfer of energy is what happens when you impact your target, and that's where we start getting into terminal ballistics as
Yeah.
opposed to external ballistics. There are there's like kind of accepted like standard industry accepted numbers for or for kinetic energy that people will say you need X amount of foot pounds of energy to kill X sized game. So I think most people say that for like an elk, you need to have 1,500 foot pounds of energy to cleanly kill an elk. For deer sized game, it's 1,000 foot pounds. Those are kind of the accepted numbers. I don't want to get too much into that because I think there's a lot more nuance to it than just like blanket statement 1,500, 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are other killing apparatuses that are happening when it comes to terminal ballistics. But let's talk about terminal ballistics a little bit, Chris. Um, what are the ways that bullets typically kill our game?
Well, you're going to have penetration,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to have initial trauma, like the size of the wound channel. So,
Mm-hmm. Some people would call some people would also say like shock. There's like a shock factor.
yeah. So if you like, which is why an arrow can go through. You could literally kill, a deer with a field point, which is just a point on the arrow, it going through. It doesn't need to be very big at all, because the wound channel, if it goes from one side of the animal to the other and it's through the lungs, they're going to start bleeding out, right?
And
Well, you can
suffocating, yeah.
on the opposite side, you can have something bigger impact from like the blunt force trauma, and it not go all the way through. It just hits one side of the animal, and it, like, let's just say it like a fist size, your fist, really blows out a chunk of one side of their chest cavity into like a little bit of their lung. Well,
Hmm.
they're going to be bleeding out a lot profusely, and it's going to take them longer to probably expire because they have the other lung's still intact and it's blood loss now. So you're measuring those, at least in my mind, when you're talking about what the bullet's doing, what size, weight, the energy, velocity. You're really measuring all the attributes of like to understand what is that going to be doing to the target when
Hmm.
it's impacting it. You want that to be efficient. You want that to be able to withstand a rib or go through, a scapula. And there's lots of things out there. Go look at YouTube. For they do a ton of different tests on like broadheads and different bullets from like gel standpoint. They look at like the wound channel, so you have something transparent. The bullet hits it at a certain uh, yardage
Angle.
or angle, and then
Hmm.
you can see it move through that gelatin. That's all really great to actually get pictures in your head and to actually now start to conceptualize as a new hunter, a new person in the firearm space, and understanding your bullets, your bullet weight, your velocities. Again, they're all going to do something when it impacts the animal, but understanding what it can do efficiently allows you to go, like if you're bear hunting and you have a front chest shot, or you're elk hunting and you have a front chest shot, you have to know where you have those spots on the animal, what it's going to do when it impacts there. Typically you always want the broadside. You want it, right at the elbow. You need to know where the heart, lungs, liver are sitting all together there. So um what do you have to add on that side of things?
I think what I'll add, and not even necessarily add, but maybe kind of it'll be a good transition for us. We already kind of teased it a little bit ago, but I think, yeah, understanding the type of bullet you're using when it's made for, because there are different bullets that perform in different ways. So I think we can go through kind of the main types of bullets, hunting bullets, I should say, and kind of what they do, or like what they're designed to do, what apparatus they use to kill game. Um, so I'll start with probably the most common, and especially in the past, the most common has been a cup and core. Um, Cup and core bullet is, it's literally a jacketed bullet. It'll have like a copper, or like a bonding metal jacket on the outside of the bullet, and on the inside is going to be lead, and lead is very soft, right? So those cup and core bullets are designed to, once they impact, they're designed to do one or kind of two things. So the first thing they're designed to do is to make a mushroom. So if you've seen anything about shooting, or seen what bullets look like, what most common bullets impact, or what they look like after they impact, you'll always hear about that mushroom. I love the way that bullet mushroomed, right? So that the front end of the bullet is going to essentially, um,
It's a point to start out. It's going through the air. It's
yep.
spiraling. So think of it as something very sharp, going very fast. Once it impacts that, the front of it actually starts to peel back over itself. If you think of it more like a chocolate melting, like a Hershey Kiss going into some, if you know what I mean,
Yeah,
if you had a
no, I
Hershey
get it.
Kiss that was in the shape of a bullet, and then you put it on a pan very slowly that's warm, and it starts to
Mhm.
like melt all in a teardrop type shape. That's what happens to the bullet.
Yep. And then some cup and core bullets will be somewhat frangible. So as the petals, people will call them petals, as the petals of the bullet start to peel back and make that mushroom shape, sometimes little fragments of the bullets will break off. And this is all happening at, thousands of feet per second. So sometimes those little fragments will come off too, and create more holes and cuts on the inside of the animal. So cup and core, those are usually, those are gonna be your more common, more common bullets. A lot of cheaper ammo will use a cup and core type bullet. It's been effective for a very long time. So that's a cup and core. Chris, you want to talk about a bonded bullet a little bit?
Yeah, I mean when they're building and putting these together, the bonded they're essentially melting it together.
Yeah, it's a chemically bonded. It's similar to a cup and core, but it's a chemically bonded
And
bullet between the
they've
gilding metal on the outside and the lead on the inside.
yeah, they've done the research has and the science behind it is very precise. So they want it to do something when it's impacted every
Hmm.
single time the same exact way. So when they're bonding, these metals together, you're looking at how soft or hard those metals are in that combination and then what it's actually doing
Hmm.
um, at that velocity.
I think the main goal with bonded is they're trying to control the expansion of the bullet upon impact, depending on what velocity that bullet's moving at. So every bullet is going to have an ideal velocity that it's operating at in order for it to perform the way they want it to. Bonded bullets are usually have a more controlled expansion as opposed to like a cup and core. And so a lot of bonded bullets you'll see out there will make the claim that they're effective at a large range of velocities and distances. So that bonded is what Chris and I primarily use for our hunting purposes. Some names of some bonded bullets or common bonded bullets out there are going to be Federal Terminal Ascent,
My favorite.
Nosler AccuBond. I'm trying to. Let's see. Norma Bond Strike is one that we've kind of played with a little bit in the past. There's the Nosler AccuBond Long Range. There's a whole myriad of bonded bullets out there that perform really well that we've really enjoyed in our applications. But next one would be like monolithic or copper bullets. Um, Monolithic or copper bullets is kind of what it sounds like. It's made out of copper, which is a non-toxic metal. There's no lead involved at all. There are certain states. I think California might be one of the only ones currently that require all projectiles to not contain any lead. So if you live in California, or listening to this, you may have to buy a monolithic or copper bullet. But the idea with copper is it's also a fairly soft metal, not quite as soft as lead. And But it's a full copper construction. Um, Tends to be slightly lighter weight. It's not quite as dense as lead. But it also stays together really well. It doesn't fragment nearly as much as lead has a tendency to. Um, One of the reasons people really like copper is that it penetrates really well. So people that are looking for penetration as their main mode of killing an animal, if you want a hole in one side and a hole out the other, then copper is a really great option. Um, and then the last one is like a varmint style bullet. Chris, do you want to speak to that at all, or do you
Yeah, I never
really?
use it.
Yeah, well, we don't really hunt varmints, but varmint bullets are just essentially frangible. They're designed to fragment upon impact, essentially almost explode. Um, so varmint bullets are not something to use on big game animals. They are designed for varmints, whether it be fur bearers or coyotes or rabbits, groundhogs, prairie dogs, that kind of thing. That's what those bullets are designed for. So it's important to know your application and what your um, intended purpose is
Yep.
for the bullet when you're selecting it. Chris, let's talk a little bit about trajectory and drop. Why is understanding drop important, and how does it relate to the external ballistics that we were already talking about?
Yeah, so you're gonna, depending if you have glass or a scope, which are the same thing, on your rifle, there is a point at which your how the bullet comes out of the barrel. Every bullet comes out of the barrel, and it's not a straight line. It actually comes out and kind of sends like a frisbee. If you're playing frisbee, it comes out and
It rises initially. It's an arc, right?
well, I guess maybe that's not necessarily true because that arc is dependent on your absolute zero with the glass, right? Like if you does it, and I guess I'm asking the question right now, does it, if you sight in it, 25 yards or 50 yards, is that bullet rising or is it an absolute zero? You never have any rise.
It doesn't matter what you sight it in at. When it comes out of the barrel, it's going to have an arc. It's going to start by rising, and then it's going to reach its apex, and then it will begin dropping.
That's
So
not dependent on the glass.
no. So I mean, like, so for
Well,
example,
if you
let's.
zeroed at 300, you're zeroing at 300. You're. I mean, I know you can see me right now,
Mhm.
but you're. I need markers. So if you have one marker and then this is your glass on top, and you're sighting it at 300, you're just pitching the gun up essentially like this to get that 300 zero.
Yes.
So in theory, isn't it like if you're just sighting in at 25 yards, it would be pitched down to level? Like, isn't there a level point? Is what I guess I'm asking.
There is. I mean, you're going to see a different rate of. Well, your rate of drop isn't necessarily going to change, but I mean, perfect
Yeah,
zero.
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
Well, yeah,
just
right.
talking about perfect zero on this.
When we're talking perfect zero, that means that's the apex of that bullet before it starts dropping. And that's going to be completely dependent on your cartridge and the bullet you're using and everything.
So there's a
Um,
distance from the end of the barrel to whatever target is out in front of you. That distance, there is an absolute like zero. The bullet will hit there on the dot, like the bullseye of that target at that distance in theory, every time.
mhm.
As you, like in a rifle, you might sight in at 200 yards.
When we say sight in, we mean that means making it so that that it, your crosshairs are going to be sighted into 200 yards. So when you pull the trigger, that bullet should go right where your crosshairs are pointed as long as that target is at 200 yards.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. So, that's why the bullet will raise coming out of that barrel a little bit, like an inch and a half, because you're
Mm-hmm.
getting a little bit of that arc going. All projectiles coming out of a bullet, unless you're like, I guess, in space, but that's a conversation for another time, are being affected by what we know as gravity, which gravity is a fantastic, fascinating topic because like no one actually knows or really understands it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just something we accept as
It's the
that
wildest
exists.
thing. Look into
Yeah.
gravity. It's like a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but going off of the quote unquote common knowledge that we've all learned, you're going to have an arc like a rainbow. It's not as extreme, but all projectiles will do that. They will have a fall off and drop rate depending
Mm-hmm.
on how, lack of a better term, fat they are or light, and then how fast they're going.
Yep. And the further that you get, or the further that projectile gets from leaving the barrel, the faster the rate of drop will be. And so when we are sighting in our rifles and we're building a ballistic table, we are looking at that to see how fast that bullet is dropping. So it will be like, okay, if I'm sighted in at 200 yards, so my zero is at 200 yards, where if I put my crosshair on a 200-yard target, it's going to hit dead center every time. Now, if I look at my table and say, okay, now at 300 yards, how many inches has it dropped from my 200-yard zero? It might be like 4 or 5 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're talking about in drop and trajectory.
So you
Um,
might, if you're sighted in at a certain distance and you range anywhere, the target's at 160 or 100 yards or 205, maybe even like depending on how hot, and when I say how hot, I mean how fast the bullet's coming out of your barrel, you might not need to adjust at all. You might just, like from your crosshair standpoint, you don't need to touch your scope or mess with any dials. Like there's an effective range or distance from wherever you are and where that target is, that if you put it on the animal, you're going to get a variance of probably 3-4 inches up and down from where your crosshairs are, right?
yep.
Once you move past a certain drop rate at a distance, you now need to get into dialing. You need to take some way an account of how you have to change the angle of your rifle in order to hit that target at distance.
Yep. So if you're sighted in or you're zeroed at 100 yards, for example, and let's say the target you're shooting at is 400 yards away, that is enough of a distance and of a difference that you're not going to be able to just take your crosshairs and put it on your target and hit where you want. You're going to have to compensate for that distance, which means that in order to hit your target, you may have to use your scope reticle that has hash marks in it. Each hash mark denotes a certain measurement of difference or distance, whether that be MOA, which is minutes of angle, or mils, which is milliradians, and we're not going to get into that because that's a whole other topic that we'll save for another day. But those hash marks are going to denote how much of a change you need to make in your shot. So you may have to hold your crosshairs well above the back of your, or well above the top of your target in order to hit it in the middle. And that's because you're compensating for the drop that that bullet is experiencing. So that's kind of that. So there's a lot that goes into shooting rifles, especially at longer distances. That's why when you're shooting short distances, there's not as many things to take into consideration just because they're easier. You're not going to have to think about all these drops. You're not going to have to think about wind as much, or maybe or altitude or elevation is one thing to think about as well. If you live at sea level and then you're hunting at 8,000 feet, it makes a difference in the flight of bullets and also where your zero might be.
Because the air density is different at different
Correct.
altitudes.
Yeah. But now we're starting to get into 200 level type stuff. But
This is course 200 level. In school, 100 level
I don't
courses,
think I
200
don't
level.
think we're quite there yet.
Oh.
Um, anyway, let's get out of the technical talk. Let's kind of wrap things up a little bit, and let's just talk about some personal experiences. Chris, share a personal story or an experience of where understanding ballistics has made a difference in your hunting success. Or maybe you could talk
Well,
about how some mistakes you made, how they've informed your current practices.
as long as I've had a scope on my firearm, I've always accomplished the mission. It is such a powerful tool because you're just doing math. You're just doing math in the field, and then the variable is you holding the rifle in your hand, or the shotgun in your hand. So I think about the deer that I have on my wall. I hit him a little bit back at, like, I think he was somewhere at 200 yards, and he was quartering two. So when an animal's quartering two, obviously the broadside, like, that animal's that target's turning and it's getting smaller, right? Quartering
Mm-hmm.
When it's quartering two or quartering
coming
away.
coming towards you or quartering away, moving away from you,
Yeah,
or
so
angling away.
I wounded him, and then we had to wait, and we went out and found him the next morning. He didn't go far. He was just bedded down, and you feel terrible on that. But again, I did shoot him, one, because he was just really wounded. His, like, front left leg was blown off from somebody. So ethically, I just wanted to help end that situation.
Didn't hurt that he had a big rack too.
No, it didn't hurt at all. Um, I I'm saying that because that's the one time with my firearm that didn't accomplish the mission quickly,
Mm-hmm.
because he was quartering two and those variables were in there, and yeah. But this successfully, even with my shotgun being, it being rifled, I've shot out over 200 yards, dropped animals on the spot. But the most fun one so far has been two situations. One, my antelope, or the pronghorn, when we was it 300 and some 310 yards,
Yep,
which
I think
isn't
so.
crazy far with a rifle. But what did we do? We did have to dial, and we dialed, or I dialed as you were calling him out, because you're laying next to me on the top of this mountain, looking down. I dialed. I waited for him to be completely broadside. Took the shot. He was quartering a little away
Mm-hmm.
from me, and I put it perfectly where I was aiming, which was really satisfying. And then also when we were out in Wyoming, and we were walking that back canyon after we heard our buddy shoot at something. We hadn't talked to him yet, so we're like, well, if he's got something, we should go help him recover it. And I was able to range for you, and that was
Mm-hmm.
really really satisfying. Because I guess we kind of feel like a sniper team. I think that's where you and I both feel the most comfortable, and we get to play a part in the accomplishment of that mission or that success. So
Yeah.
that's really satisfying, and that's I think that's what I just initially kind of think about when you ask that question. What about
Mm-hmm.
you?
I think about my pronghorn as well, um, mainly because
And we don't
s-
have that many Western hunts right now.
no,
We
not
have
a ton.
a good group of them, but for those of you listening, we're still more in the novice area and like do it yourself area of these hunts. We definitely have enough knowledge now to be getting into the dangerous territory,
Mm-hmm.
and effective territory, and that's really exciting and fun. I don't feel like I'm outmatched now if I go out and do any of the hunts out west because we have one or two, hunts under our belt
Yep.
of each of like a species, right? The elk I think is
Yeah.
the only one we've only done once, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that pronghorn hunt, that was our first Western hunt with a rifle. And so that was really my first time hunting with a rifle. Um, and we had decided that year we had um, zeroed our rifles at 200 yards,
Mm-hmm.
expecting longer shots, which yours ended up being a longer shot. Well, your first pronghorn wasn't.
70 yards.
Yeah, 70 yards. Mine ended up being about just a touch over 100. And what I learned in that moment was, I mean, I guess I didn't, I mean, yeah, it's every experience is a learning experience. What I experienced in that moment though was my shot was very rushed because the that pronghorn was running, and I had to get ready. I had to get a shot ready before it was gone. Luckily, it stopped for just a couple seconds that I was able to get my shot ready to go. But with it being as close as it was, I had forgot um, about the fact that I was zeroed at 200 and that pronghorn was a lot closer than 200. And so I aimed for center mass, right behind the shoulder, kind of in the lung area. And because I was closer than my zero when I shot, it actually hit my antelope in the spine, which worked out because the antelope went down immediately. It severed the spinal cord, you know, destroyed the central nervous system. Didn't kill it right away, but it did paralyze it so it wasn't able to run away. It wasn't a miss, but it didn't hit the animal the way I wanted it to. And in that moment, I remembered that's right. If my target is closer than my zero, I'm going to hit high. And I didn't compensate for that in the moment, because I was rushed and wasn't thinking about that. And then, and again, since it wasn't, I mean, the difference between 100 yards and 200 yards with a rifle, when I was using a 30-06 at the time, it's not a huge difference. It's going to be maybe an inch and a half, and so that's probably about how high I hit. So I really did hit my target, but I just didn't think about the compensation I would have to make by actually aiming lower on the antelope if I wanted to hit where I had originally planned. So understanding ballistics and understanding the trajectory of your bullet at certain distances is really important. And something that we do, and I think probably most people do, is we actually have either a chart, our ballistic chart for our rifles and our load on our phone, or also maybe on a little piece of paper that you have taped to either the side of your rifle or to your scope cover or something like that, so that when you're in the moment and you get a quick range on your animal, you can be like, okay, they're 300 yards. How much do I need to compensate for that? Or what's my drop going to be? And it's just right there for you. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to do math. You can just know, okay, here's what I need to do to make that shot, to make my shot hit where I want at that distance. I think just practice is a big thing, to really understand ballistics and your ballistic tables and shots at distance. We've practiced a fair amount. I wish we could practice more. It's kind of tough when you live, in a metro area. to get out to an area where you
I
can
don't live
shoot
in a
longer.
metro area.
Yeah, but do you? Yeah, I know you used to. It's harder to go out and shoot longer distances when you have to drive at least an hour to go shoot some longer range
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
And we have some access to that, which we're blessed and fortunate. So I'm very
mhm.
thankful for that.
Just
But
harder to
it's,
find the time to do it because it's not
yep.
just like a quick 15-20 minute thing. It's usually ends up being about half a day. But yeah, so just practice and learn your tool, learn your rifle, learn your holdovers, learn your dialing, you know, understand understand the different metrics or measurements of minutes of angle or milliradians, whatever you prefer. Learn those systems so that you're best equipped and you're ready to go when the time comes, because the last thing you want to be doing when the buck of a lifetime is standing out in front of you is just thinking and trying to do math in your head and not fully understanding what you're doing.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, Chris,
Should
unless
we
you
make
have
some should we make some predictions?
some predictions.
Yeah, I was
I
thinking
have
like, so we'll be going out west this year. Let's just what range do you think you're gonna down your muley?
well, last time I was out there, I shot my mule deer at about 280 if I remember correctly. I mean, I could definitely see the shot being further than that, but I don't know. It was just in that area, and with the kind of the terrain and the topography, I don't know if it would be really too much further than that.
Well, it depends, like, because we are going back to the same area,
Hmm.
but as there is some, I when we were up on what do we call the rocky part?
I don't remember what we called
We
it.
named it. It
It
was like
it's probably on our Onyx maps or something, but
there was a very high point in all of the area we were hunting,
hmm
and it was just a ton of boulders, and it was big.
hmm
And I remember hiking up it, and we were ranging off of it to some distances, and I was like, it's only 360 to that, and it looked so much
so
further.
much further. Yeah.
Holy cow, it looked so much further. It looked like easily 600 yards, if not
Hmm.
1,000. So it's just very different out there. But if we are sticking more towards that river bottom area, there's some distance out there. So I'm not
Definitely.
trying to be one of those stretch shooters, meeting the quota of 500 yards. I actually don't want that.
Right.
But
I'm gonna be prepared for that.
I'm guessing mine, whatever I'm going to be shooting, could well be in the low fours.
Well, I think that's very realistic for hunting out west.
And luckily I'm pretty comfortable for sure at 500 and less. When we've shot like 550 and getting out there, and I think it was some variables with my glass. I think I had adjusted incorrectly, right? Because we went back out and sighted a few times, and I was having trouble that one time.
Hmm.
But 300s all day long. That's a really nice distance for a rifle, and I feel equally as comfortable as four. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
was just trying to make a fun game of it.
No, I think I'll predict that my shot will be 325 yards.
I do 415.
Okay. I mean, here's the deal. If I if I see a mule deer and it's like, let's say it's five, or let's say it's even 450 yards. If there's an opportunity, I know I can make that shot,
Mm-hmm.
but if there's an opportunity for me to get closer, I'm going to try and get closer.
Oh yeah,
Just because I can do it doesn't mean that I necessarily want to do it or should do it.
it'll be a challenge to figure out what's like a really good glass point to also see the river bottom, because we're gonna want to see back up into.
Where we
I mean,
were.
it's all the similar topography. Anytime you go out west, you're gonna have these rolling, somewhat chasmous uh, areas of topography. So you're gonna want to find the high points, and then you're gonna have some low, veins running through those areas.
Hmm.
Water, standing water. Maybe there's some flowing water, but typically you're gonna get standing water when it's in the west in Wyoming, because it's, at least where we're going, it's gonna be
Pretty dry.
dry. Yeah,
Yep,
and then
certainly can be.
watch for snakes.
Yeah.
Hate those things.
Okay, here's another game.
Okay.
Of the people that have, I think, confirmed in our group, who do you think draws first blood?
Because it's you. Yeah. I don't know. Drew seems an antsy guy on the trigger.
Well, he
Not
drew
from
first.
being antsy, but I just think he's ready to get in and get going.
Yep,
He's like, oh,
definitely.
there it is. Let's get that guy. And I think
Yep.
you and I are more like we're holdouts. We're opportunists for sure. We're 100% opportunists because if something that's decent, we're not going to like pass it up. We came out there, we paid money, you've invested the time, but you and I are holdouts too. We're looking for something that we
For
can.
me, it's just going to depend on what point of the hunt it is. Like if I see a okay buck and it's like the first day or two, I'll probably wait. But by the end of the trip, if I see that same buck again, he might be looking pretty good because at the end of the day, I'm primarily there for meat,
Yeah.
and antlers are just a bonus. So, yep. All right. Well, I think we wrap it, Chris. For for everyone who's listening here, if you've made it all the way through with us, share with us what your thoughts are on different cartridges. What's your favorite cartridge to shoot? What's your rifle setup, and what are your thoughts on ballistics? What's your favorite type of bullet to shoot? Are you a bonded bullet guy like us, or are you one of those monolithic copper bullet people? Because I feel like there's just these camps of people. Or are you one of the guys, classic FUD, who just doesn't really care what he shoots out of his rifle as long as it works? Just share that with us. Message us on social media. Go ahead and follow us. Shoot us an email if you have anything else you want to hear, any specific topics. If you have any questions for us, again, we're not experts in any of this, guys. We're just normal people, just like you. We're learning too. Luckily, we have some experience under our belts, but we're learning new things every hunting season and off season as we research more and practice and everything. So don't feel like we're claiming to be experts. We're certainly not. We're here to learn alongside you and just share with you what we've learned. But with that, Chris, whiz bang.
ReadySetHunt.org. Check it out.
Awesome.